get started this morning, and I'm sure that more people will filter in as the time wears on. This is the last of the three classes that we're offering in this particular session here with the title of Christians in the Voting Booth. And we have a very, I think, engaging presentation this morning, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I did want to call your attention to the fact that we're going to have a new cycle of classes beginning next week. And the first of those is going to be by Pastor Schmitz. He's going to be talking on the parables in the New Testament, and that's going to be over in Piper Hall, and that's going to run, I think, for 6 weeks. And then here in the music room next week, we're going to start a three-class session on exploring sanctuary at Zion. And one of our own members, Emmeline Weiner, is going to be giving that particular presentation, the first of three presentations next week. Well, today we're going to be talking about what I have titled, and I hope you all have a handout. You all have a handout? No, you're just like my freshman. Yes, okay. Can we have some help with the handouts, please? Yes, indeed. Okay. It's on creating fair and equitable congressional districts here in the state of Michigan. And on the handout, that's what I've titled it, Creating a Fair and Equitable System of Voting Districts in Michigan. And once again, because we are members of Zion Lutheran Church, I think it behooves us to ask the question why we should care. As members of Zion Lutheran Church, why does this matter to us? Why should we be interested in learning about this effort? And it's been around for quite a while now. Why should we care about this effort to create a fair and equitable system of voting districts here in Michigan? Well, bullet points always help, and I have a series of bullet points here. First of all, to my mind, fair elections are an issue of social justice and a means to achieve social justice. And we've been talking about this as we've been looking about the issue of political advocacy for our first class, and then as we were looking at expanding the franchise and ensuring that people had the right to vote in the class last week. The issue of social justice is really at the root of these sorts of things. And we need to know that the system of voting districts in Michigan is fair and equitable. And this has to deal with the whole issue of social justice. Embedded within this concept is the idea that we treat all individuals with dignity and respect. And I think you can see the link there between a fair and equitable system of districting and the dignity and respect that we owe to all people. The issue of fairness aside, to be effective as advocates on social issues, and we've talked about the need for us to be engaged in advocacy and in social issues and other issues, we need to know that our representatives are responsive when we advocate for reform or a change. There are many, many social needs, environmental issues, educational issues, issues of homelessness, issues dealing with elderly care and access to health care, and on and on. These issues of social justice that concern us as Christians. And while we could and do try to tackle these problems and needs outside of the political process, the fact is that we can be much, much more effective working through the political process to address these issues. But in order to be effective advocates, working within the political system, the voting system needs to be fair and equitable. And finally, I would point out another reason why we should, as members of Zion Lutheran Church, be very, very concerned with creating a fair and equitable system of voting districts here in Michigan. And that is the ECLA itself has taken a very strong stand on the issue of voting rights. For the ELCA, this is a two-part issue. First off, ensuring the individual's right to vote is for the ELCA an issue of social justice. But the ELCA has also closely linked the right to vote with an individual's right to engage in advocacy on the political level for issues of deep concern to the ELCA. And the goal of this effort, to address the issue of social justice embedded within the right to vote and to allow ELCA members to be effective advocates by expressing their will in the voting booth, is stymied if voting districts are not fair and equitable. So what I've tried to do here is just simply to link much of what we've been talking about, issues of social justice and issues of fairness and the stand of the ELCA on these issues, with the issue of creating a fair and equitable system of voting districts here in Michigan. Well, this brings me then to our speaker for today, and that is Ms. Sue Smith. She is the president of the League of Women Voters in the Ann Arbor area, and she has kindly agreed to come and talk to us about this initiative of a plan, which looks like to me a very intriguing and interesting plan to go about trying to create a fair process for redistricting here in Michigan. Susan? Please. We could probably clap if you
Oh, thank you. And good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ron. And I think I'm going to move this back a little bit because I don't want to get in the way of your being able to see the screen. Are you okay with that? How's that? Is the camera okay with that? Well, as Ron said, I'm here to talk a little bit about redistricting. And when I first started doing this back in the fall of 2015, at that time we did 70 of these presentations across the state of Michigan. And we have been, so the league has been talking about this topic for a long time. And more recently, actually following the 2016 election, there was a great deal more interest in looking at this issue. And a group called Voters Not Politicians was formed, and they have been working on a ballot proposal, which will be on the ballot this November, and of course encouraging people to vote for it. What I want to do this morning is tell you a little bit about how we got to this point by using this flyer. I hope everybody has a copy. If you don't, they're at the back.
I think everything.
And then I want to talk in more detail about how this would work. How would it work if the proposal passes? Now before that, I want to just say something about the League of Women Voters that you might already know. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. We do take positions on issues that we have studied that are of public interest, and this happens to be one of them. But this morning I'm wearing my education hat. I'm not here to promote your voting for it. I want to go through how we got here, some of the pros and cons. And so as part of our education piece, you each have this little business card. On one side it says voteforone.org, and this is where you can go to get information on your ballot, whether you're registered or not, on all the candidates, their responses to the questions that we posed, all the way from the governor's office to local elections. So everything is there for Washtenaw County, put in there by the League of Women Voters. And on the other side, it says Turbo Vote. Now, if you're afraid you might forget election day, you go there and put in your contact information, and they will send you a reminder, don't forget to vote. I hope you're registered. October 9th is the last day that you can register to vote for the November election. So be sure that you take care of that if you want to vote. While I'm here to talk about redistricting this morning, the League is doing a series of town halls. The first one is tomorrow night at the downtown Ann Arbor Library. The next one will be Wednesday at the Westgate branch of the library. And then we have 2 in Ypsi, 1 in Chelsea. So we're doing these around the community, but the topic is not redistricting. The topic is what's on your ballot. What ballot proposals are you going to see on the ballot? There are 3 state ballot proposals and 3 Ann Arbor ballot proposals. One of the Ann Arbor ballot proposals is what's known as the library lot ballot proposal. And those of us who lived around Ann Arbor have heard conversations about this for a while. I think we had a ballot proposal on it a few years ago. Anyway, we're gonna do a town hall on that. Downtown Library, October 25th, which is a Thursday, 7 o'clock. That will be just on the library lot. Okay, so I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to ask you to jot down any questions you might have and save them for the end, because sure as shooting, whatever you ask me, is going to be something I was going to talk about in 2 or 3 minutes. And then there will be a question and answer. So, all right, first of all, I want to kind of get a sense of the people in the room and what you all know. How many people know what it means gerrymandering? What does the word gerrymandering mean? Okay, that's quick change from fall of 2015. It's certainly been in the news. Sometimes people equate gerrymandering with redistricting, but gerrymandering is a special kind of redistricting. Redistricting is something the legislature has to do after each census. They have to redraw the maps because there have to be an equal number of people in each district. Gerrymandering is when the political party in power, it doesn't matter whether it's Republicans or Democrats, both do this gerrymandering thing and have been since the 1800s, but whichever party in power draws the maps in such a way that it'll keep themselves in power. Well, that's what gerrymandering is. All right, so let me just take a few minutes to go through this little flyer. Welcome, come in. Just grab a flyer and come join us. Now, right now, the maps in Michigan are drawn by the legislature. And that's true in 26 other states. It's a piece of legislation. It goes through the House and the Senate and signed by the governor. It's like any bill. I'm going to be cognizant of the time here. But when these current maps that we have now were adopted in 2011, following the 2010 census, it zoomed through the legislature in 12 days. I happened to be at the hearing. I was president of the state league at the time. I was at the hearing where the House committee had called on the proposed maps. And when I went in, I don't know if you've been to a hearing at the legislature, probably some of you have. There's a table when you first walk in, and there's a stack of bills that they're going to be having the hearing on, and little cards you fill out saying whether you're going to speak in favor or against, and what the bill number is, and who you are, and so forth. Are you representing an organization? And then, of course, the bills. So I came in, picked up a card, picked up the bill, sat down right in the front row in my red jacket, because people remember colors. They might not remember my name, but they see me sitting there and they say, here she is again. Well, anyway. So I was sitting there and I opened it up. Now, here's the cover, here's the back, open it up, nothing inside. Nothing inside. All right, so then the committee comes in, and then the staff comes in, and of course, the majority of the committee members are Republicans because they had control of the House. And the staff comes in and distributes a bill, a substitute bill. And then the person took it to the back table, set it there, so we all went back to get the bill, sat down, opened it up, and it's just a bunch of census numbers. You know, when you get your bill from the city or the township for property taxes and telling you, it describes your property, so many yards, north and south and whatever. Okay, that's what this was. So I looked in there and I couldn't find Morgan Road, Ypsilanti in there. You know, there was no designation like that, and nor could anybody else. But they did bring in a map about the size of that easel over there, and it had the state of Michigan on there, and it had the maps. Well, now, if you lived in the Upper Peninsula, no problem, right? Congressional District 1 is all of the Upper Peninsula and the northern part of the Lower Peninsula. But if you live in southeastern Michigan, it was impossible. I went over there and I looked. I couldn't even find Washtenaw County. So, those were the maps, and they had 3 maps because they draw these maps for the US Congress. We have 14 people. And then the Michigan House and the Michigan Senate. And that's what we had to look at. And they had the hearing and people stood up and complained. And then they ended the hearing, called the vote, of course it passed, went to the House, same thing happened in the Senate, the governor signed it, 12 days, we had maps. That's not what's being proposed on the ballot by voters, not politicians. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Just want you to know how it works right now. In the middle of this little flyer is some interesting information. I mentioned that the party in power, it doesn't matter whether they're Republicans or Democrats, manipulate the maps in a way that keeps themselves in power. And so if you look at the Michigan Congress, for example, in 2012, if you look at the total number of votes cast for Congress in the state, the Democrats got 51% of the vote and the Republicans got 46%. Then you look at how many seats each of the parties won. The Republicans got 64% of the seats, 9. And the Democrats, who actually got more votes, ended up with 36% of the seats, 5. That's what we currently have. Similarly, in the state Senate, the vote between Republicans and Democrats, the total vote, in this for state senators, is pretty much split between the Republicans and the Democrats. But the Republicans ended up with 71% of the seats, and the Democrats 29%. In the State House, it was a similar situation, 50-50 in terms of the total votes cast, but 57% of the Republican elected, 57% of those elected were Republican, and 43% of those elected to the State House were Democratic, even though they got 49% of the vote. So this is what happens. This is gerrymandering. This is an example. Now, the Democrats do it too. They do it in Illinois. They're infamous for doing it in Maryland. Whoever is in charge, they do this. I mean, this is how they stay in power, right? So, and there's no law against it at the moment anyway. And so what that means is that a lot of the districts are not competitive. Of the 110 House seats, only 10 are competitive. Which means that unless you vote in the primary, you don't have much choice about what's going to happen in the general election. Now there are other ways to do this, and there's a listing there on the third column. What are the options for redistricting? The legislature can do it. That's what I just described. That's how they do it in Michigan and 26 other states. You can have an advisory commission, but the legislature still decides. Elected politicians can decide. That's what they do in Colorado and Ohio. Or what's of more interest to us this morning, since this is what's on the ballot, you can have an independent commission. Now that doesn't mean that everybody who's on the commission is independent. Sometimes you hear people say, well, this is impossible. You can't find 13 independent people in Michigan. People are either Republican or Democrats. Well, what it means when we say independent is it's independent of the legislature. If you have an independent commission, the legislature doesn't have any say over the maps. So that's what that means. And then somebody was asking me earlier about some states that had chosen to do it differently. So on the back you see what is the solution. And I mentioned that independent commission is one solution. In California they have 14 members, 5 of whom are Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 neither. And it's a little bit different in California than Michigan because they have to declare a party in order to vote in the primary. So they know who the Republicans and Democrats are. That's not true in Michigan, which has an impact on how the process would work here. Arizona was one that was passed earlier than California. They have 5 members, 4 from the House and Senate majority, and 4 from the House and Senate minority, and then 1 independent. Can you imagine? 1 independent. Well, the governor of Arizona sued that individual for not doing something, but the governor lost. In any event, Arizona is quite different, as you can see, than California. The Michigan one is based somewhat on the California model. And then you have to decide what criteria you're going to use. There has to be equal population, because of the Supreme Court decision in 1964. You remember, 1 person, 1 vote? There have to be minority rights protected, the Voter Registration Act that was passed by Congress. And then there's a question about how compact they have to be. They do have to be contiguous. Now, Ann Arbor cannot be in the same district as Mackinac Island. Right? They have to be geographically contiguous. And then communities of interest, which is always a big debate. What's a community of interest? And then should you preserve municipal boundaries, for example? Should you try to keep a county together in 1 district? Is it okay to split up the county? The current maps, Oakland County is split into 4, and each of those 4 squares are attached to a district outside of Oakland County. So you can have somebody representing Oakland County who doesn't live in Oakland County. And then, is there a way to change the process? If we don't like what we have, what can we do about it? Well, the legislature can put it on the ballot, or citizens can put it on the ballot. And that's what happened in Michigan. You might remember that Voters Not Politicians conducted a very successful petition campaign, collecting well over 400,000 valid signatures, which is what it requires to get on the ballot. And we all get to vote on it on November 6th. Now I want to take just a few minutes to explain, well, how would this work if we actually have this proposal, because there's been a lot of controversy and allegations made back and forth about how it would or wouldn't work. So this particular PowerPoint was developed by the Brennan Center at New York University Law School by these 2 people, Michael Lee and Alexis Farmer, and they made it available for people to learn. They're not supporting or opposing the proposal, they're simply explaining, well, how would it work? There would be 13 people on the commission. 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 here called independents, but it could be anybody who's not a Democrat or Republican. It could be a Libertarian, Green Party, or actually no party. What are the qualifications to be on this commission? You have to be a registered voter, and you have to submit an application. Those are the only qualifications. But there are lots of exclusions. Certain people cannot be considered. And these people are someone who's been a candidate or an elected official for a partisan office within the past 6 years. Cannot be an officer or a member or a governing officer of the local party or the state or national political party. They can't be employed by the legislature. They can't be an elected official, a candidate, work on the campaign, or a PAC, or be an unclassified state employee. And you can't be a paid consultant like a lobbyist. Well, you might wonder, why are they excluding so many people? They're trying to take the partisanship out of it, to keep the parties from getting their own folks on the commission and then being able to control it that way, since they wouldn't be able to do it through the legislature. Furthermore, a person considered to be on the commission cannot be one of these relatives mentioned here, or an appointed or elected office by the Constitution. And then you see again, commissioners are ineligible from holding partisan elective office in the future for 5 years after serving on the commission. So they don't want people to get on the commission and draw a map that's going to help them get elected in the future. We already have that. I mean, why bother, right? Okay, now the selection process is interesting. Again, there was an attempt to keep people from gaming the system. People are really smart about figuring out how to game the system. So, applications would be coming from 2 different sources. Number 1, applications would be available. The Secretary of State would make them available. Anybody who was a registered voter and who didn't fall into one of those categories I just mentioned can apply to be on the commission. They throw their hat in the ring. In addition to that, the Secretary of State would send out mailings, 10,000 mailings, 10,000 applications, randomly drawn from the qualified voter file, from all the people who are registered to vote. Now, the formula they would use would be geographically weighted in such a way that there would be equal representation across the whole state. So, Ann Arbor can't be the only one on the commission. You know, everybody has to have a chance to be on the commission in this random draw. So we have 2 pools now. We have people who applied, and then a bunch that replied because the Secretary of State sent them an application. Now from each of those 2 pools, 30 Democrats, 30 Republicans, and 40 independents are randomly selected. Okay, so now we end up with 60 Republicans, 60 Democrats, 80 independents. Half of them came from the random mailing, and half of them came from the people who applied. Again, another random selection is made. Well, I'm sorry. Before that, the legislative leaders each get 5 strikes. So the Republican had majority leader in the House and the Senate, and the Democratic leader in the minority leader in the House and Senate, each get 5 strikes. I mean, it's just like a jury selection, right? You can eliminate some people. So if somebody falsely claims, because this is how you decide whether a person is a Republican or a Democrat, they self-identify. So if, let's say, the head of the Republican Senate looks at the list and says, well, that person says that they're a Republican, but I know that they're a Democrat, so I'm striking that name. So this is to keep people from lying about whether they're Republicans or Democrats, because it's not like California, where you have to register as Republican or Democrat in order to vote. So there has to be some way of figuring out who are Republicans and who are Democrats, and that's the system that came up with self-identification, and then an opportunity for anybody who's not being truthful to be eliminated. So 20 people out of this pool could then be eliminated. Then there'd be another random draw. Again, the draw is from so many from the Republicans, so many from the Democrats, so many from the Independents. Those pools are never commingled. And you end up with, you end up with 13 commissioners. 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4, it doesn't add up to 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 3 independents. So anyway, you can see this is how the commission would get formed. And it's complicated, right? It's hard to explain. I don't know how they're going to explain it in a 30-minute soundbite. But the idea is people are randomly chosen to be there, and they are not linked to political parties, and they are not eligible to run for office, so they can't draw the map in a way that would favor them if they were to choose to run in the future. Okay, so that's how those folks get there, those 13 folks. Now, the next thing, of course, is the maps. Now, remember I explained how we got the maps the last time? Boom, boom, boom. Made behind closed doors, nobody knew what it was, the Democrats didn't know, the public certainly didn't know. And they voted on it immediately, and not even all the Republicans knew. Okay, before they vote on the maps, they have to run a computer program to make sure that there's compliance with the criteria. And I'll talk more about the criteria in a minute. In order to adopt the final plan, there has to be a majority vote, which must include at least 2 commissioners from each political party, plus 2 who are independents. So the Republicans can't just adopt it on their own, the Democrats can't adopt it on their own. Nobody can do it on their own. Now, what if there's a deadlock? We'll use something called ranked choice, which some of you might be familiar with. And if there's a tie, I don't quite see how there would be with 13 people. It'd be up to the Secretary of State to make the final decision. Okay, what are the criteria and what are the rules for how this process operates? Okay, I mentioned the criteria were so important. The first one, and districts have to have equal population. Okay, that's a Supreme Court decision. We have that now. They have to comply with the Voting Rights Act, that's what VRA is, and any other federal requirements. They have to be geographically contiguous. I already mentioned we can't be in the same district as Mackinac Island. They have to reflect the state's diverse population and communities of interest. Now, what is a community of interest? It might be a group that shares cultural or historical characteristics, or they might share economic interests. They do not include relationships with a political party. You can't claim I should be with this group because we're all Democrats or we're all Republicans. It can't be those who are incumbents or political candidates. So this is the sticky part. What are the communities of interest? Because it's a little more nebulous than some of these others, which are more mathematically quantified. Districts shall not provide a disproportionate advantage to either party, any political party. They can't be drawn to favor or disfavor an incumbent or a candidate. This has happened. Probably aware of some districts that have been drawn that intentionally leave certain people out, or they draw it in such a way that certain people are in so that the person can easily get elected or will easily be defeated. They shall reflect consideration of municipal boundaries. I remember I talked about how right now Oakland County is divided into 4 pieces, and it's possible. Oakland County is the most populous county in our state. It's possible to have a representative who doesn't live in Oakland County. No representatives who actually live in Oakland County. And if you're familiar with the Grosse Pointe area, I believe there are 5 points. Those all got divided up. And then the district should be reasonably compact. Well, that's the last one. And the thing is, as you adopt these various criteria, it precludes some other ones. So in order to meet all these others, the district might not be all that compact. Public participation. There have to be hearings, 10 public hearings in different parts of the state. 5 of them have to be after the proposed maps are made known. Open meetings are required, and they have to be accessible by television or online. The public has to be able to submit their own plans. The commission has to publish the plans and allow at least 45 days for public comment. Now, what a contrast that is to the 12 days it took to go, the current maps to go through the legislature when we showed up on a Friday afternoon in Lansing, and we didn't know what the maps were except at the last minute, just before they voted for them, and they were just shown on an easel, or nobody really knew what the maps were, let alone how they got there or what factors they used. And after it's adopted, the commission has to publicize it, and they have to explain how they arrived at their decision and the materials that they used. There has to be a budget, and that's in the proposal, that the legislature has to fund it with at least 25% of the Secretary of State's general fund for that fiscal year. And in California, they didn't do that, and the legislature refused to fund it, so of course they couldn't operate. So then they had to fight that battle in the legislature. So they want to make sure they avoid that. They retain independent, nonpartisan legal and subject matter experts. And they maintain records, and then the commissioners themselves would be paid at least 25% of the governor's salary, which would be almost $40,000. So the total cost, I believe, is $4.5 million if this were to pass out of the state budget. And then, this is just a calendar of what came and went. So, very quickly, questions? Yes, sir.
Would the commission meet only in the same year frequency that redistricting is done now?
Well,
after the census?
After every 10 years? Yes, but initially they would still be constituted for a while, because for a while they're going to be court cases. Certainly it's going to be fought in the courts if it passes. And so they have to be there to exist. Ron, you had a question?
Well, I was interested in the salary, almost $40,000. Is this meant to be during the time that they're meeting? Is this meant to be a full-time job or a part-time job?
Well, I don't know, whatever time it takes, but that would still be decided by the commission and how many meetings they needed to have, and at certain times of the year they have to meet a lot more if they're traveling up to the Sioux to give them have a hearing or something. So how full-time or part-time it is not determined.
So in one of the components, there was this notion of making sure that the proposal was not disproportionately advantaging one particular group.
One party or the other, yeah.
What defines disproportionate?
Well, of course, that's what courts are for, right? What lawyers are for. They wrote it the way they wrote it, and I should just briefly say, the VNP wrote the proposal, but the ballot language that you're gonna see in November is not gonna mention voters, not politicians. It's not gonna mention the word independent. It is gonna mention the word citizens. And there was a big fight over what that ballot proposal should say, and the Board of State Canvassers, made up of 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, had to pass it by September 7th to get it on the ballot. And it went to court, and it was just amazing all the kinds of machinations that went on before they finally agreed on what the language would be. It's a maximum of 100 words, and of course, each side wants it written in such a way that somebody who goes in and sees it for the first time and knows nothing about it will vote whatever way they want people to vote. So, yes.
Will there be any kind of a backup commissioner in case somebody on the commission should pass away or become sick and not able to carry out their duties?
I'm assuming that there is some kind of provision for that. I don't know that particularly.
So that's not part of what we'll see on the ballot.
Right. You're not going to see anything of what I just talked about. Come to the October 1st meeting and you'll
Is
see.
there any way to make sure that people are not being bribed?
Yes. They're not allowed to talk to anybody except in a public meeting. Now, how you actually enforce that, I don't know. But I mean, if that's a requirement, then of course, if people don't follow that, then there can be legal action, and I'm sure there will be. Yes, somebody who hasn't already asked them, Margie.
I know the selection process is very complex. Number one, do they have to take, do each party gets to eliminate a certain number?
Right.
Do they have to eliminate a certain number?
No, up to 5.
Okay,
But it would be from each list, it's not just
Yeah.
theirs, right? It
Yeah.
would be the total
right.
group.
And there was no consideration for gender or ethnicity or anything like that, I guess?
It does say that it should represent the geographic diversity of this, or not geographic, represent the diversity of the state.
Mhm.
However you define that under the criteria, must reflect the state's diverse population and communities of interest. But again,
Yeah,
that's gonna be a lot of court decisions. Some of this is gonna be resolved by the courts. It's really difficult to put every little detail
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
And
So, yes,
the ballot proposal is available for viewing, I mean, now?
yes,
Yes.
you can go to vote for one now.
Oh, okay.
Commercial
All right,
here,
it's there. Okay.
and it'll be there,
Okay,
and it also has the pros and cons.
yeah, it seems.
And if you come to the town hall tomorrow night, at the downtown library, where I'm gonna explain all that. I'm gonna talk about the ballot proposal.
Seems an important thing to read ahead of time.
Definitely. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Secretary of State is named several times in your presentation.
Yes.
So my presumption is that that function will also serve as an advisory for the commission?
No, no.
So
They
there's gonna
serve
be-
2 roles. The Secretary of State would send out the random applications, but it would be random. And also, if there were a tie, although if there are 13 people, I don't know how that would happen. The Secretary of State would have the final approval, but no, they have no, other than that, the Secretary of State has no role in the process. Yes.
I have a question on salary.
Uh-huh.
So this is an annualized salary, so if they're not working full-time, and is it every year, once you get over the legal things and going out?
Then they're done. They don't get paid every year for 10 years. They're working. Yes. Yes, sir.
Do they have expenses in addition to, like, traveling, if one's in the Upper
Right.
Peninsula and one's...
Right. They have a budget. I mean, each person on the commission is going to get paid around $40,000 as a salary. And then there would be a budget, which is 25% of the Secretary of State's budget item, to do just what you suggested. You need travel expenses, room rental, materials, all that kind of stuff. And so the total cost has been estimated to be $5 million to pay for the independent commission, including everything. Yes, Bob?
So you mentioned a couple times that there are states who have, sort of enacted,
Right.
similar types of, procedures. Can you speak really quickly about, how long it took those states to implement those plans?
Okay, this will have to be the last question because I know Ron needs time to
Okay.
do his,
Sure.
discussion with you all.
Or what?
Has each state, ask me again?
I'm just curious how long our process
Oh.
might take,
Oh.
looking at how long it took other states.
Oh, well, it'd be implemented right away because they've got to come up with the maps for 2022.
Okay.
It's not open-ended in terms of timing. Okay, Ron.
Thank you very much. All right, so on the back of that handout that I created, I have a list of themes and ideas to think about during and after the presentation. And the first one I think is really pertinent to what we're doing, and that is, does the issue of redistricting fall within the scope of Christian discipleship? Does this really matter to us? Certainly it's important, there's no doubt about that, but should this matter to us as Christian disciples? And forgive me for repeating what I wrote last week, but Jesus has commanded us to love our neighbor, and this, together with his commandment to love God, is at the root of Christian discipleship. How we treat our neighbor, how we view him or them, is very much wrapped up in Christian discipleship. And why is this? First of all, because we are all God's children. And in order to show our love of God, in order to show our love of neighbors, we must, as Christians, treat our neighbors with love, respect, fairness, and dignity. And I think that it really speaks to how we view people. If we are part and parcel of creating an unfair voting system, I think so. I think that's a reflection of how you view other people. And one of the things that I really liked about Sue's presentation and what this is doing right here is it's nonpartisan, right? It's nonpartisan. And for you Democrats out there, Democrats are absolutely as guilty of doing this as Republicans are. Let's not. This is not a Republican issue, right? This is a political issue right here. And I think that as Christians, we should strive to make this fair for both sides. I really do. Should we not then, as disciples of Christ, strive to treat our neighbors with love, respect, fairness, and dignity when it comes to the issue of congressional districting in Michigan? And I'll just leave that out there, and you can wrap your minds around that. I do have several questions building upon the presentation that Sue made. Consider the several steps being advocated in the Brennan Center's proposal. Do they strike you as being fair? Is this fair? It seems to me that what they're doing is they're putting into place a number of steps that are forcing people to collaborate. That's a word that's not used often in politics today. That's one of the things that I like about this, right? People are going to have to work together. Do they appear to be nonpartisan? And I think very much so. They're going to force people to sit down at the table, and they're going to force people to work together. And importantly, do these steps meet the test of establishing fairness, respect, and dignity for others in the political process? You're stunned, you don't know. Well, for my money, they seem to be doing that. They really do. They seem to be doing a good job. Do they meet the test of addressing the issues of social justice we have been discussing? And I think so. I really think so. And finally, I dare to ask, where do they fall short? Is there anything up here that you think could be improved upon, or is there anything that's just glaringly being overlooked?
Well, one thing I worry about is that it doesn't seem to be a test for capability.
Oh.
So you might randomly select people who don't have the intelligence, the wisdom, I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's possible that you could have people who really wouldn't do a good job or couldn't do a good job because they're just not capable of understanding the scope of it. And when you do all this randomness, and there's nobody interviewing or checking, what is your reading level? What is your education level? Are you actually capable of sitting at a table and making a map? So I worry about that. That strikes me as the one shortcoming in the process.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, because usually there are like preliminary interviews and then second interviews and things like that. Did you want to address that?
Yeah. That's a really good question, and they did, in California, they interviewed everybody. And they didn't have as many exclusions, because they did interview people. It was easier to figure out whether they were partisan or not. The one thing that's important to keep in mind is that these people are not going to draw the maps, right? They're going to hire experts, just the way the legislators do. But the legislators don't draw the maps. They hire somebody to do it. And the criteria that have to be used are spelled out. So the commission can't just do whatever they want to do. They have to have maps that meet these criteria. Now, I don't know that I want, well, I have to be careful about what I say, but I mean, look at the maps we have now. I mean, to me, the question is, will they be worse than what we have now?
That's a pretty low bar, though.
Okay, but I mean, let's at least have maps that are fair to voters.
Yeah.
That's what the league is concerned about.
There's also provision that if someone isn't doing their job, the rest of the commission can remove that person. So it sort of answers that question.
But how do they replace them if you don't have a backup pool? And then you get the tie situation.
They do have a backup pool. They have all those people that the final pool that they narrowed it down to, from which they took the 13, those other folks are still there.
Can be called.
Yes, please.
I respect Sharon's opinion on this, and I don't know how I can be optimistic after the week that we just had, but I'm going to go out and say that perhaps having someone come in who isn't predisposed to this, who hasn't really thought a lot about this, and I'll be very honest, until this past couple of years, I've not really been very political or very involved in what's going on. But, I think we could very well have someone bring a freshness or a virginity to this, that might be welcome and refreshing. But again, that's totally optimistic. So.
Yes, please, Bill.
How does this fit with the U.S. Constitution? In other words, the founders really had a republic. It's not a democracy, one man, one vote exactly. It was done to have select people do the voting. And there is along the line here that certain class, aristocracy decided that they were the ones out there, people would do the voting.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there's any question about that.
Yeah, that's well, you can thank Andrew Jackson for extending the franchise, right? That happens where you get the popular vote coming in under Andrew Jackson. But did you want to address that? I mean, is this constitutional, I guess?
Yes, it's constitutional because it would be following the two major requirements from the federal government determined by the Supreme Court, which is there has to be districts of equal population, not equal area, but equal population. And secondly, you have to follow the Voting Rights Act, which protects the rights of voters, which I don't have time to go into all.
And I think it's left up to states to do this.
Every state is up to the states to do, but of course it has to be constitutional, and there will be battles in the Supreme Court about whether it is or not if it passes.
Okay. Any other?
It seems to me that what I remember about the Constitution is it was pretty, citizenship was a broad thing, and everybody was expected to be considered a citizen. There weren't no tests for.
No, but remember,
except for
blacks couldn't vote, women couldn't vote, people who didn't hold property couldn't vote.
Yeah.
There were a lot of exclusions that have since been rectified.
Yeah. There was a difference between being a citizen and having the right to vote. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are out of time. Let's thank Sue one more time. Hope to see you all next week down here again.